Hello everyone and welcome to another free live YouTube session on GK for Cat. आज हम कंटिन्यू करेंगे लास्ट टाइम का टॉपिक जो है एंशिएंट हिस्ट्री एंड in order that there is some continuity, I would like to recap a bit what we studied. So, primarily, we studied about the Indus Valley civilization, time period when it existed is roughly from the 4th millennium BCE, that is starting around 3999. So this is not an exact year. I want you to understand what is the 4th millennium BC. So somewhere around 3600 or so, Indus Valley civilization, the proto-Indus Valley civilization began, started to take shape. Then around 2300 BCE, the mature Indus Valley civilization occurred, and 500 years later, around this time, around 1800 BCE, later Indus Valley civilization happened. When we say later, we mean that all the systems of standardization, all the culture established by Indus Valley civilization began to start getting destroyed. All those standardizations like bricks, town planning, weights and measures, all of this began to be lost. What were the reasons? So the reason why Indus Valley civilization declined, now of course, as I told you in last class, we cannot literally go there and see what was happening, but through the markers, through the remains, through archaeological and literary studies, what we get to know is that few of the reasons were, so initially people ascribed it to this reason, Aryan, they called it invasion, because Vedic gods like Indra were also called Purandar. Pur means fort, and someone who destroys these forts is called a Purandar. So, like we saw in last class, that Indus Valley civilization settlements, IVC settlements, they were separated into a citadel and lower town, and the citadel is mostly fortified. It is a fortified structure. So somebody who will break these forts will be called Purandar, and hence this evidence along with Mohenjo-daro, Mound of the Dead, so in one of the archaeological discoveries, remains of some dead people clustered together, and they had some deep gashes, some deep cuts, marks of wounds, remains of some scar on their skeleton. And so the archaeologists surmised that there might have been a violent clash between the migrating Aryans and the Indus Valley people. But later it was discredited, and rather than calling it invasion, it was Aryan migration. So what is important to understand is that the pastoralist Aryans, they migrated over a long period of time, 500, 600, 700 years, and slow and gradual intermingling happened. Words were picked up. There was change in language. There was some syncretic principles that were evolved, and concepts like mother goddess or Pashupati, such concepts merged with Vedic gods like Rudra and Ushas, and therefore a syncretic Hindu religion as we know it today evolved. Initially, it was not called so. It was known as Vaishnavism, Shaivism, Shaktism, and all of this later, with the efforts of Shankaracharya, Adi Shankaracharya, it merged into one single united religion, which is known now as Hinduism. So this was a brief about what we covered in last class. The marvelous facts to remember about Indus Valley people, Indus Valley civilization is that there was town planning, there was high degree of standardization of weights and measures of the bricks, and they had proper drainage system. They were master hydrologists. They built in-house toilets, which is something we all must realize that it has been part of our culture. Hygiene, remaining hygienic, has remained part of our culture for a very, very long time. So now let us move ahead and see what is in store for us to learn. So yes, a few questions that can be asked you in the exam are the largest Indus Valley site, which is in India, because Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, these sites now fall in Pakistan after the partition of India in 1947. But the largest site in India is Rakhigadi in Haryana, which is on the banks of the now extinct, now dry river Ghaggar. Kalibangan, you can remember it with burnt bangles, Kalibangan. Lower fortified town, these are some of the unique features, like the lower town was also fortified. Generally, in all other Harappan Indus Valley sites, what we observe is that the citadel was fortified and the lower town was not fortified. Citadel, which is something built on a raised platform, that is why we call the other part of town lower town. So generally, we do not find that the lower towns were fortified, but in Kalibangan, we see that even the lower town was fortified. The other discoveries are fire altars, copper dog. This is one of the unique findings, and this indicates that dogs were domesticated even at that point of time. Then we have Rangpur, which shows evidence of rice. Generally, other grains like millets and barley were grown. Then Chanudaro, there was a proper bangle factory, and it is the only city without a citadel. So this might have just been a factory settlement of Indus Valley civilization. Then Ropar in Punjab, there we find a burial practice where a dog was found buried with his master. Then there is Dholavira. It is the only site with three parts. Indus Valley sites are generally divided into two parts, citadel and lower town. But Dholavira is the only site which is divided into three parts. There are water reservoirs. There was a stadium too, as well as there has been found a board or what you would call a something similar to a hoarding, and some 400 symbols from the Harappan, from the IVC language, were inscribed on this board. So these are some of the unique findings, unique sites and their unique features. Lothal was a site with a dockyard. This dockyard too was built of baked bricks, and water was controlled through sluice gates, and it could be drained out as well, the water, or when there was high tide, so ships could easily come in. Inland, it was an inland dockyard. And so one question that could be asked: in the previous budget, the government of India planned for a maritime Heritage Museum. So if you see this term, remember to match it with Lothal. Then we come to, so in the intervening period, we do not find much evidence intervening period between the high period of Indus Valley civilization and the proper Rigvedic civilization. There's a gap of around 1,000 years, of which we do not know much, but we know that the Vedas, the Rig Vedas, were written down somewhere around this time. And since we know that Aryans were a pastoralist people, they were not settled agriculturalists. So agricultural people who are practicing agriculture, they need to be settled in a single place. Whereas pastoralists, even today, you will see like Gaddis in Himachal Pradesh or Bakarwals in Kashmir and some parts of Himachal Pradesh. During summers, they will go up the mountains in Bugyals or the grasslands, mountainous grasslands, in order to graze their cattle, in order that they can find greener pastures. So these were pastoralist people. They kept moving from place to place, from one place to another, and that is why the word gram, which today means a hamlet, a village, at that time meant a caravan. Initially, it meant a caravan, and whenever it stopped, wherever it stopped, they put all their carts in a circular or semicircular fashion. And once they became agriculturalists, it was these places that came to be known as gram, or it stood for something settled. That is why you will see the word sangram, which means a battle. So when two villages meet, they fight for cattle, they fight for pastures. It was called sangram. So words, they reveal a lot about history. They contain a lot of history in themselves. As you would be aware by now, if you have started with vocabulary classes, if you've started learning vocabulary, you will know that words have roots, they have an entire history behind them. And this is one small example to show how the Rigvedic Aryans too evolved. They became agriculturalists, settled people from being a pastoralist people. So horse, why we emphasize horse? Because horse was nowhere to be found in the Indus Valley civilization, neither its remains. In one or two places in the upper layers, in the later part, horse has been found, no doubt, but in any of their seals and sealings or other places, no mention of horse is there. And Aryans, they have used the word Ashwa in many places in Rig Veda as well as their chariots were horse drawn, they were swift, there was spoked wheel, their wheels were spoked, as compared to the carts represented in terracotta toys and copper toys. What we witness is that the carts, the wheels that the carts have in Indus Valley, they were solid disc wheels, whereas the Indus people had spoked chariots. And cow. So cow, which is known as gau, there are many words formed from this as well, like gavishti. That means a fight for cows. This also means war. Then gotra. Gotra, people would be aware there are different gotras in same caste, and this gotra means nothing. It means the shed where cows dwell. So people dwelling in the same shed, dwelling in the same household, they belong to one single Gotra. That is where Gotra word comes from. There is another word, Duhitri. This is a word for sister. The one who would milk the cows is called Duhitri. So these are some words related to Rigvedic times. It is good to know them. So Aryan invasion or migration, this has been answered. One thing that we missed was what was the reason for the demise of Indus Valley civilization. So since we have denied this invasion theory, it might be a possibility. Later researches and discoveries can still reveal some things. But for now, the accepted theory is one of migration. So we do not follow up much on this reason for the decline of Indus Valley civilization, which is invasion by the Aryans. The other theories are tectonic shift. So you must have witnessed the phenomena of, or must have heard news related to earthquakes. So earthquakes occur because of these plate tectonics, and they cause movement, they cause change in the landform, not the landform, but the topography. And so it can cause a change in the course of river. A river that might be flowing like this at one point of time might start changing its course and flowing something like this. So imagine all the settlements on this river, because they are based on agriculture, and now the only source of water, if agriculture is not available, only source in desert like areas, so they will have to move away from that place. Even today we are witnessing water crisis in places like Delhi, Bangalore, Kolkata. All major metropolitan cities are facing water crisis. Just imagine if for a week or so you do not have access to water for your other necessities. Maybe there is still water available for consumption, but if there is no water available for all the numerous tasks, chores during the day, then you will eventually have to move out of any settlement. So water and tectonic shift led to change in course of rivers, led to a change in the course of rivers. So this, one of the reasons attributed is tectonic shift. The other reason was climate change. So we are talking of a time period that was 4,000 years before Christ, before Common Era. 4,000 plus 2,000, 6,000 years ago. We are talking of a time period that was 6,000 years before us. So paleoclimatic studies, paleo means old. So old climatic studies of the old times, they reveal that there was an increase in rains, there was an increase in the rain that occurred in this area around 3000 BCE, which again subsided. That rains did not remain to that level, and because of this climate change, again that settled agriculture had to be given up, that settlement had to be given up, and people started moving to different places, to other places which had fertile land and some irrigation available. And the other reason is overgrazing and chopping of woods. Why would they chop so many woods? Because you can guess, because they needed so many burnt bricks. And since coal and other methods of electricity, generating electricity, were not available, so brick kilns, they required something to heat up, something to fire the bricks, and the material used was wood. And since they were doing it in a large number, their forests remained no more. And these are the few reasons because of which Indus Valley civilization came to an end. Syncretism, we have already discussed that the principles as they exist today, the religion as it exists today, it is built from many different religious principles that was existing, some from the Indus Valley civilization, some that belong to Rig Vedas and the Aryans, taken from different sources. Then we divide the time period, the ancient history, into two parts. One is the early Vedic period and then is the Rig Vedic period. Early Vedic period, when it is defined by certain features. Early Vedic period. So the features were no taxation was there. No taxation, only tributes. Because there was no hereditary king. Generally it was the eldest member of the tribe, and that too elected in samitis and sabhas and samitis. But as we move on, so now this is of the time period when they were still pastoralists. They were still moving. So everybody had to contribute in any war, everybody had to fight. There was no differentiation or specialization in terms of job. Everybody had to do everything. No specialization means no caste system existed. Of course, any such development will occur over 1 century, 2 century, maybe 3 centuries. So there was no definite time period which we can ascribe for the emergence of caste system. But during this early Vedic period, definitely these were its features. And if you remove these features or just reverse these features, you will know what was the situation like in Rig Vedic period. Yes, another feature was of early Vedic period itself. Women had high degree of freedom. In terms of they were warriors, they were sages, they were poets. They contributed in all these things. There was no restriction on what a woman was allowed or not allowed to do. There were not many restrictions. And one name that stands out, that is there in the Vedas, is that of Gargi. You must have heard of Gargi College. So named after this Rigvedic saint, seer, sage. One of them, one of the contributors in few of the mandalas of Rigved. So this was early Vedic period, and in marked contrast to the early Vedic period, now if we just reverse those features, we will see what was going on in the Rig Vedic or later Vedic period. So now there will be a standing army, Standing army means which is always ready to go to wars, and it is not just the farmers who take up spears rather than plows. So there is a standing army. Standing army, hereditary king. Hereditary means by birth, hereditary king. There was no election, the position was inherited. And since there is a standing army, there will be taxes. Only tributes won't do. There will be regular taxation. There will be specialization of tasks. There will be specialization because now society is settling down, practicing agriculture. So there will be caste system as well. And with settlement will come bondage of women and freedom of women will decline. Some orthodoxies will set in. So these are few of the features of later Vedic period. Then comes the Janpad period. Now you see, as settlement has begun, so Janpad, 16 major, there were others too, as mentioned in different texts, some Buddhist texts, there are other Janpads as well, but these are the major Janpads spread across India. You can see their name as was mentioned in various texts. What texts were these? Other than the Vedas, there were Aranyaka, Brahmana texts. We'll discuss these terms as well. Then there were texts like Panini's grammar text. I give you time to recall. In later slides, we will see. So Panini's grammar text as well contained the name of some of these Janpads. So Ang is with its capital Champa. It is one of the rivers in Bihar. River in Bihar. And modern day Munger and Bhagalpur region were covered by it. What we know as Vang, Ang, Vang. It is this Vang which we today know as Bang, Bengal. Bang itself comes from this Vang. Magad, we all are aware, it was the first empire. Empire, when we say empire, it means the proportions will be large, much larger compared to these Janpads. And there's a very specific, there are a few reasons why Magad and no other Janpad turned out to be the preeminent empire, the predominant empire of that time. With its capital, initially it was Rajgir, then the Kalashok belonging to the Shishunaga dynasty. Kalashok shifted the capital to Patliputra. Then Udayana and other people maintained that thing. And finally, during the Mauryan times, Patliputra became the capital. Present day, Nalanda, Gaya, and moves to Patna finally. Kashi, still Kashi, and modern day Varanasi. Vats, with its capital Kaushambi, located in Allahabad, or what is its current name, Prayagraj. Kashi, Kaushal, Ang, Magad, these places are also in Mahabharat. Shravasti was its capital, modern day Awadh. Then we have the Saurasen Mahajanpad with its capital in Mathura, modern day Mathura. Panchal, some of you must have heard the name Panchali, a character in Mahabharat. So she belonged to this kingdom, Panchal, with its capital in Ahichhatra, and it is centered around modern day Bareilly, Badaयूं, and Farrukhabad. Kuru, Kauravas, the story of Mahabharat, Kauravas versus Pandavas, and their capital Indraprasth, situated right here in Delhi, modern day Meerut. Matsya Mahajanpad with its capital in Viratnagar, commensurate with modern day Jaipur. Chedi Kingdom in the region around Bundelkhand, where you have the Malwa plateau. And then again Avanti, modern day Ujjain or Maheshmati, around the Malwa plateau. So these are the major Janpads, their capital and their modern day location. So few other things. Purush Sukt, this is the Rig Vedic Sukt, out of which caste system was born. So not everybody can understand or can comprehend society in a younger age. As long as you do not know yourself, it is difficult to comprehend the principles of society. And so it is important that some such analogy, that it is God given. Now all of us understand at a certain point that society as it exists has not been created. It is not an order of nature, rather it has been created by humans themselves. And so some or the other change or whatever you think is right is done by people. But in order for people to understand or to not question and just keep doing their work, when this economy is static and there is no avenue of growth, then it is the sacred duty of every person born in whatever profession, whatever family that you are born. It was the sacred duty of that person to carry out the profession of his or her father. And in order to explain it to people, it was said that out of the primordial man called the Purush came out all the four castes, head which does thinking, learning. So that was ascribed as Brahmins. The arms which do fighting and other tasks necessary to protect, they were ascribed to Kshatriyas. The stomach which runs the whole body, which is like the engine of the body, was ascribed to Vaishya, or the word comes from Vish, meaning people again. And finally, Shudras, they were ascribed the lowest position in society, the most menial, mundane tasks to be done. So it was said that they have come out of Purusha's legs. Administration, we saw initially there were sabhas and samitis, later on caste system and hereditary kingship took place, came into practice. Taxation changed from tribute to taxation. Evolution of text, we saw through certain example that there was change in words as well. Then initially there were Vedas only, and they are written in sutra style. Sutra means a terse, very less worded, not loquacious, terse aphorisms. Anything that is said in few words and not expressed completely. Say for example, there is a saying by Kabir, कि बुरा जो देखन मैं चला तो बुरा न मिलिया कोई. So on this single two-line aphorism, you can say 10 pages, 20 pages, or an entire book could be written just explaining this aphorism. So similarly, sutra literature, the thread, or what we mean in Hindi by thread. So this sutra literature was commented upon, interpreted, and came Aranyakas. Aranya means jungle, and when people who were not very used to living the society life, seers, sages, they went into the jungles, they made an interpretation of the Vedas. They said they were metaphors, not literal truths, and then came the Brahmanas, which went into philosophical dwellings, and finally, the pinnacle of all this philosophical endeavor, of this philosophical thought, came to be known as Upanishad, or what we know as the end of Vedic literature, or Vedant. Vedant, Vedant, and Upanishad. It has various meanings. One of the meanings is Upanishad, to sit down besides a guru and break all your bondages of ignorance. That is one of the meanings. There are multiple meanings. This is one of them. And then there were Smriti versus Shruti literature. Smriti, memory, what you remember. For example, Manu Smriti, rules of society, rules of behavior. When a society has settled down, everything needs to be governed in a proper way, like inheritance. Who is going to inherit the property? Otherwise, there will be fight every time the progenitor dies. So there will be a fight between those inheriting the land. Therefore, some rules need to be made. Regarding marriage, rules are to be made when people are dwelling together. So such rules were coded in books called Smritis. And Shrutis, or what were heard by the sages in their deep meditation, in their state of trance. So Vedas are an example of Shruti literature. So Smritis versus Shruti. Then there were texts like Sulva Sutra, which contained little bit of geometry, mathematics, because this was the art of constructing, art of preparing ritual altars, where Vedic sacrifices occurred. Then you had the Shrauta Sutras, literature describing rituals, public rituals, like the coronation of the king, like Ashwamedh Yagya, like Vajpayee Yagya. So public rituals. The text which contained it is known as Shrauta Sutra, and there were Grihiya Sutras. Rituals of conducting household ceremonies like Upnayan Sanskar or Namkaran Sanskar, when a child is given name. There are 16 samskars. Samskar means Sanskrit, well, comes from Sanskrit, well made. So humans, if they want to be a proper member of, or if they have to be made a proper member of society, then lot of instinctual behavior needs to be suppressed, needs to be taught, to unlearn and become a polished member of educated, having good etiquettes. In order to become such members, lot of work needs to be done, and this is what was termed as samskar, being well made, Sanskrit, made well. So these are some of the literature regarding different so some of them remain. Gandhar, from where Gandhari belonged, the famous character of Mahabharat, and its capital was Takshila. Today, currently, it is in the modern day Afghanistan and Pakistan. Kamboj, belonging to Kabul Valley. Kabul River too was known as Kubha. Then Asmak Kingdom, on the banks of Godavari, Vajji, Vaishali, where Gautam Buddha was born, and Malla Kingdom. Kushinagar, modern day Kushinagar, written in Buddhist Pali text as Kusinara, place where Buddha died. We don't say died for great people, we say place of Nirvana, where Buddha attained Nirvana. Now, we come to the first kingdom, first modern empire, not modern empire, but the first empire to rise as an empire. And the only important thing to know, to learn, is to ask the question, first ask the question, why is it that Magad and not any other, any of out of those 16 Mahajanpads that we saw, why did they not become an empire? And why did Magad become an empire? So, these are some of the reasons. One of them is geography. So, the Magad Janpad, you will see that Ganga separates into two streams around this place, and there is Son coming from here. So there is Ganga, Son, and Gandak. So these rivers make transportation very, very easy. Goods can be carried from here up to here. And in one of the classes on economy, we discussed that the inherent strength of any empire, like any body, your body will have as much strength as good is the blood flow in your body. If the blood clots anywhere, if there is stagnation, then your body will not be healthy. Similarly, in an economy, if circulation happens, if trade and commerce happen, then that economy has inherent strength. And this reason is the primary reason. Its geography was benign enough to support it. This led to transport and trade. And also, you will be aware that Jharkhand, present day Jharkhand, Chota Nagpur Plateau, there is Tata Iron and Steel Plant there because it has iron ore. And around 1000 BC, Iron Age begins in India. Iron Age. Discovery and large-scale usage of iron begins. And it is with these iron plowshares, hull. So the tip, only when it will be made of a sturdy metal will it be able to turn, will it be able to carry out agriculture in the thick alluvial soil of Gangetic plains. This entire region of Uttar Pradesh and especially Bihar is highly fertile because lot of alluvium is brought down by Ganga and its tributaries. So this fertile land from where Ganga passes, first it needed to be cleared because there was a lot of forest. There were a lot of dense jungles in this region. So they could be cleared only with the help of Agni or fire. That is why Agni has been praised a lot in Shatpath Brahman. Shatpath Brahman, one of the Brahman texts. Aranyakas, Brahmanas, not the caste, but the genre of literature, the genre of the text. Shatpath Brahman, 100 paths to the divine. Shatpath. So forests could be cleared and agriculture could be carried out. That land could be tilled only with the help of iron. Also, weapons could only be made with iron, strong weapons. So this was another factor. Mines and minerals, they were another factor which led to rise of empire. All of these factors will work together, and the climate supported three crops a year, 3 times, 3 cropping seasons: Rabi, Kharif, Zaid. All of these are cropping seasons. And since there was a lot of crop, there was a lot of surplus. There was the possibility of growing rice. Today, rice can be grown anywhere, be it Punjab or Haryana or Bihar or Bengal. But without irrigation facilities on that large scale, the only places where rice can naturally grow, because it requires a lot of water, it requires puddles, the only places where it could go was Magad, Ang, Vang, these regions. And rice having higher calorific value, it can support a larger population. So when people will have enough to feed, they will have more children, and an increased population means a bigger standing army, and a bigger standing army means more conquests, easier conquests. Then it was these jungles which had huge elephants which could be used for war, and therefore they were another factor that contributed to the rise of Magad. We will know that, or I should tell you at this point, that the most important defense deal of ancient world, defense deal or defense treaty of the ancient world was exchange of gift of 500 elephants by Chandragupta Maurya. Chandragupta Maurya, he gifted 500 war elephants to one of the generals of Alexander called Seleucus. Seleucus Nicator. And in return, Seleucus gave him his daughter's hand in marriage, and there was peace with the western borders, which was previously occupied by Alexander, and then later it fell into the hands of his generals. Greco-Bactrians occupied that region. So initially, this was the deal that maintained peace on external front, and later on, Chandragupta will go and defeat the Nanda dynasty, final king Dhananand. He will go and defeat. And finally, one of the reasons, so all these factors could not have created an empire if there was no ambition in the person who killed his own father, and his name was Ajat Shatru. He will kill the king Bimbisar, the first dynasty to be known in historical terms, about whom history mentions, a story that will be written by historians. So these, in brief, are a few reasons which led to the rise of Magad as an empire. Marital alliance, Ajat Shatru married princess of Koshal, one of the Janpads that we saw, and then together they defeated Ujjain, Avanti Mahajanpad. And therefore gradually larger area came in under his control, and therefore he had more men, more weapons, and more resources at his disposal, and therefore he could start conquering a larger region, which was carried on by further dynasties, and ultimately there will be a culmination, there will be a climax during the reign of Ashok the Great. So Buddha, during the 6th century BCE, a few details of Buddha's life. So textual documents, Buddhist documents, canonical literature mention his birth to be 563 BCE and death to occur in 483 BCE. But archaeological evidence points to his date of birth being around the year 480 BCE. So there is some contention, some controversy surrounding his birth. He was born as Siddharth Siddharth to father Shuddhodhan and mother Maya or Mahamaya. And at the age of 29, he renounced his home, his wife, and his child in order to live his life as an ascetic, also known as Shakya Muni, because he was born in the Sakya clan. Sakya Muni. Sakya Muni. Events related to his life, four major events that are of primary importance. These events were Mahabhinishkraman, represented by a horse. Then Dharma Chakra Pravartan. Horse is used to symbolize in many of the architectural details like Toran Dwars, pillars. You will find a horse symbolizing his horse known as Kantak. Dharma Chakra Pravartan, represented by the wheel occurring in Deer Park, Sarnath. That is where he preached his sermon to his first four disciples. Sarnath also has octagonal, as the octagonal stup, and in between these will lie his Buddhahood under the Bodhi tree, and the symbol used is the Bodhi tree for representing his enlightenment or attaining Buddhahood. Buddh means, Buddh comes from the word bodh. When you are aware, when you know, when you have the bodh of what actually is going on, the nature of reality, how things are, then one is called Buddh. And finally, his leaving of his body, known as Mahapari Nirvan. Mahapari Nirvan, represented by the symbol stupa. Symbol of stupa represents his Mahapari Nirvan. So horse, Bodhi tree, a wheel, these represent the four significant events of Buddha's life. It is also said, there's a brief point, but it is said that Buddhism and Jainism, because both the proponents of Buddhism and Jainism belong to the Kshatriya clan. So it is said often that these both religious movements, they were, and initially to begin with, they were not religions, they were logical discourses given by Jain, for Jains, Mahavir, and for Buddhists, Buddha. It was a discussion, it was a debate, and there was no religion to be instituted. It was a way of life. Religion, as we know, is also a modern phenomena when it is used as mass delusion, when it is used for mass delusion, for political control. But religion is there in order to answer some basic questions of life, like birth, death, the accident of birth, why somebody was born in a rich family or a poor family, or why somebody was born with some kind of deformity. In order to answer these questions, people came up with terms like karma and transmigration of soul. Transmigration of soul. So, against certain practices, these people reacted. They gave proper way of logical thinking. The light of Asia, Buddha, term used for Buddha in his book of eponymous name by Edwin Arnold. One of the facts you should know. Non-violence and Ashoka's political astuteness. So, Ashok, it is also said that since his empire was already the greatest that has ever been witnessed, the largest in extent, so it was time to consolidate it. If he had not made efforts to consolidate it, it would have crumbled very soon. And so it did happen. Only 2 generations later, the Mauryan Empire came to an end. 2 or 3 generations later, the Mauryan Empire did come to an end because it was spread too thin, its boundaries were too vast for centralized control, and therefore it broke up into small empires by taken over by Shung. Pushyamitra Shung, one of the generals in Mughal army, he took over the kingdom. And so we say that Ashoka's astuteness is shown in his rock edicts and pillar inscriptions, in which he gives injunctions regarding way of life, how people should dwell together, that you should respect elders, you should not show cruelty against animals. So these injunctions were basically meant to subdue the tide of freely flowing emotions in people's hearts, and so that events like fratricide or disrespect of people, the bonds on which society rests, they could be maintained. And he accepted the principle of non-violence from Buddhism. That is another way of his astuteness, because he could not carry out conquest forever, and so he looked for dharma vijay. He looked for conquest in terms of spirit, and that is why he is called Ashoka the Great, one who gave up. He did have enough means that he could have fought many more wars, he could have conquered, plundered, a lot of things he could have done, but rather than doing that, he tried to conquer the spirit world, and that is why he is known as Ashoka the Great. Despite having all the means for violence, he shunned violence and took a different route, a different path, and we must know why he is called the Great. So we will stop here and continue from Ashokan dynasty, from the Mauryan dynasty. We will see which dynasties existed prior to Ashoka, and we'll move ahead of Ashok and know some more facts of ancient history. Thank you.